past 12 months, clearly there has been a different conversation about, fossil fuels in general, considering the energy and food prices, the war in Ukraine, and many other sort of like political and macroeconomic variables. There is one thing, however, that it hasn't changed is that, we were planning to reach peak oil, and we have reached peak oil. And also we have achieved and arrived at the point where renewable energy, whether it's solar or wind, has become cheaper than, the fossil fuel options. And so a lot has happened in a year, but the path towards net zero continues, and it's becoming clearer that fossil fuels, in fact, if you look at the last 12 years, lead to much more uncertainty as well as create many more macroeconomic problems for economies than for cleaner energy options.
But with respect to solar and wind, yes, they're at a much cheaper price point now compared to fossil fuels. But especially looking at economies here on the continent, we're not seeing a massive expansion in solar and wind capacity, at least not in grid-tied supply, at least not in the last 5 years or so. What's holding development back? Is it that peaky nature of the power that comes in from these two sources, or is it a question of the operating environment in which these investments would have to be made?
That's a very good question, and indeed that's a reflection of what's happening in Africa and many parts of the global south. Capital is not reaching to the volumes that are required to indeed, take advantage of that potential. And part of that discussion is taking place these past days during the COP27 negotiations. But this is not something that is new in terms of not even being mobilized the amount of finance that was committed in Paris. Now, outside of that, and if you think about the private sector as well, there's significant amounts of capital sitting elsewhere, whereas there is all this potential. Of course, there's a number of reasons why this is happening, but of course, there's also solutions that are on the table. And at the policy side, there's a number of de-risking solutions that are available to make the enabling environment more possible for that capital to take place. That also required support in order for capital to be coming down. But then there are also financing de-risking mechanisms that require the use of concessional finance, blended finance, to again pave the way for significant amounts of private capital to come down.